All right, if you're operating DHC-8 aircraft, listen up. There's a critical new mandate from Transport Canada, and it's going to directly impact your access to U.S. airspace. So today, we're going to break down this new 5G Airworthiness Directive. You know what it is, why it's a big deal, and exactly what you need to do to make sure you stay compliant.
And really, with 5G rolling out everywhere, it all boils down to one key question for every single operator out there. Is your fleet actually ready for these new interference challenges? And let me be clear, this isn't some far-off, we'll deal with it later kind of problem. No, this is a here-and-now compliance issue, and it's got a very firm deadline.
So let's get right to the headline. There is a new, mandatory directive, and it's in effect right now for all DHC-8-400 series aircraft that operate in U.S. airspace. And just to be crystal clear, this is not optional. It's a direct response to a pretty significant flight safety concern, and it's all linked to 5G.
Okay, so what are we actually talking about here? The official name is Airworthiness Directive CF-2025-43, and its whole purpose is to deal with interference from those 5G C-band signals. You know, the ones that can mess with the radio altimeter on de Havilland DHC-8-400 and 402 models. And that deadline? It's September 16, 2025. It's locked in, so you got to circle that date.
Right. So you might be asking yourself, why is this such a huge deal? Well, it all comes down to an invisible threat that can have some very, very real consequences. Let's dive into why this 5G interference is such a critical flight safety concern, the reason this whole mandatory action was put in place.
The core issue is actually pretty simple when you break it down. Think about it. Normally, your radio altimeter is feeding you clean, accurate height data. That's absolutely vital for safe approaches and landings, right? But when those 5G C-band signals get in the way, they can totally corrupt that data. And suddenly, you're getting dangerously wrong height information, which can lead to system malfunctions at the worst possible moment. And look, these aren't just what-if scenarios. We're talking about confirmed risks, backed up by de Havilland's own analysis. Interference can cause all sorts of chaos, from false warnings going off in the cockpit to the autopilot getting jumpy. But honestly, the scariest one? A delay in the propeller disking when you land. And that delay? Well, it directly means a longer, and I mean potentially unsafe, stopping distance on the runway. That's a huge deal.
Okay, so we've established the threat. It's real, and it's serious. So now, let's flip over to the solution. The good news is, Transport Canada has laid out a really clear plan for compliance that every single operator has to follow.
All right, the plan is basically broken down into 4 parts. Now, parts 1, 2, and 3 are your immediate interim actions. These are things like making sure you don't dispatch with an inoperative anti-skid system, putting specific placards in the cockpit, and beefing up your flight manual procedures. But, and this is a big but, these are just temporary fixes. The final, mandatory step, the big one, is what's called the terminating action, and that means getting your aircraft to a full radio altimeter tolerant configuration.
And I really want to hammer this point home. If your aircraft uses specific airplane flight manual supplements, we're talking 37, 39, or 77, and you fly in the US, those interim actions we just talked about, they are mandatory right now. You have to have them in place, and they have to stay in place until you've completed that final terminating action.
So what exactly is this radio altimeter tolerant, or RAT configuration they keep mentioning? Well, to put it simply, it's the end goal. It's the whole point of the exercise. It's an upgrade or a modification to your radio altimeter system that basically makes it bulletproof against that 5G C-band interference. This is the permanent fix, the thing that officially satisfies the directive.
Now, you know as well as I do that a technical directive like this is never just an engineering problem, right? It creates this massive ripple effect that spreads across the entire airline. We're talking impacts on different departments, all the way from the flight deck to the finance office.
And you can see that impact felt pretty much everywhere. Your safety department, they need to bake this risk right into their SMS. Operations, they might have to start adjusting US route planning. On the commercial side, you've got teams that need to budget for these RAT upgrades, and they have to think about not just the cost, but aircraft downtime too. And don't forget leasing. This directive has direct contractual implications. I mean, 5G compliance is now a must-have clause for any aircraft flying in the US. The bottom line is, everyone has a part to play here.
Okay, this brings us to what might be the most critical part of this whole conversation, the timeline. Because the clock is absolutely ticking, and believe me, the deadline for this directive is completely non-negotiable.
Here's the date you need to have burned into your memory:
September 16th, 2025. That's it. That's the effective date of the Airworthiness Directive. After that day, if you're not fully compliant, you cannot operate your affected DHC-8 in the U.S., period.
So here's your action plan, plain and simple. Starting today, you need to be assessing your fleet and planning out those RAT modifications. At the same time, you have to keep those interim measures in place for any and all U.S. operations. And then, the big one. That final, permanent RAT configuration has to be done before that September 2025 deadline rolls around.
And in case you're wondering, well, what happens if we miss that deadline? The Canadian aviation regulations don't mince words. The rule is absolute. If you haven't met the requirements of this Airworthiness Directive, you are grounded. It's really as simple and as serious as that. No wiggle room.
So as we wrap this up, it really all boils down to one simple fact. Your ability to operate your DHC-8 fleet in one of the busiest airspaces on the planet is now directly tied to your compliance with this directive. We've laid out the information, the deadline is set in stone, so the only question left for you is, what's your next step?